back to Secret Weapons, and today we are taking a look at one of the most inscrutable and formidable pedals we have used, demoed, featured, talked about on this channel, the POLY Effects Beebo for all intents and purposes. The reason I say that is because this thing is in actuality, covered in fingerprints, apologies. Ben Jordan would be disappointed I didn't get a stylus for this one. But this is also kind of two multi-effect monsters in one pedal. This thing has the Digit and the Beebo inside of it. For the purposes of this video today, we are only looking at Beebo, the recent release from Poly. We'll do something on Digit in the future. We also use a little bit of Digit on the intro for some reverbs and for some other stuff. But for the rest of the video, we are Digit focused. So let's stay on target. Let's just jump straight into what this is. This is a frequently updated, seriously, like in the time that I've had this, there's been, I think, 4 software updates, firmware updates, that have done everything from streamline the menu functionality to adding modules to just kind of general performance improvements. This is one of the most adaptive and ever-changing pedals I've ever used, which one, can make it very difficult to review, and two, really means that it's not going to get old anytime soon. Like I said, this originally released as an entirely different pedal, and now with a touch of a button, you can switch between the two firmwares in here. It's wild. We're kind of rambling right now because I'm having a hard time figuring out what to talk about first, what to kind of really focus in on when talking about this thing. Let's start with the hyper basics. 3 foot switches, all assignable. By default, C will bypass the pedal, but not only do you have 3 foot switches that are assignable, A and B together can be assigned to D, and B and C together can be assigned to E, so that you technically have 5 different foot switches accessible to you when assigning things to foot switches. The ability to bypass effects, the ability to tap tempo, the ability to make big dramatic changes to your sound. You can reroute your audio that way. It's amazing. Speaking of audio routing, one of the coolest things about this pedal, and we have, why am I doing that? We have manual focus turned on right now. On the top of this pedal, you've got your, let's pull back so you can see it, your 4 inputs right here. I've got a monitor over here. I'm gonna try not to look at myself too much. You have your 4 inputs right here. But the thing about these inputs is this is not stereo in, stereo out. It can be, but each of these inputs, each of these ports is a TRS stereo capable port, meaning you have 4 ins and 4 outs on this freaking thing. That is, we're not taking advantage of it in this video. I'm so sorry. I have a lot of ideas for how I want to utilize that. I just have not had the time to like bring those ideas to life. I was going to say you can manage your entire wet, dry, wet rig inside of this pedal, but you can actually run an entire wet, dry, wet rig inside of this pedal. You have great sounding IRs, great sounding convolution reverbs, and the ability to add your own convolution reverbs and your own IRs. And you have enough inputs and outputs to run a full 3 amp rig internally in this pedal. And I don't know what the limits on the processing power of this thing is, but I've stacked a lot of crap into this thing effectively. This has some A+ resource management in it because you can do a lot in one patch on this thing without it running out of juice. It's kind of crazy. You've also got your MIDI in and your MIDI out, and something that makes me very happy is a standard size USB port for firmware update. It's not USB to your computer for the updates, unfortunately. It is a USB stick to upgrade, but that's actually, like, as far as firmware updates on pedals that I have used, this has been far and away the easiest and simplest way to do that, which is really cool. Okay, so we've talked about how cool the actual device is and how cool the like feature set is, but how does it sound? So now that I've put it down, so I'll stop fiddling with it, let's talk about how it sounds. It sounds super good. It sounds, I mean, first of all, the IRs and the convolution reverbs can be your own as well, so it can kind of sound however you want it to. But the delay modes in it sound great. They're really high fidelity considering multi-effects often aren't. The compressors sound great. I really like the chorus sounds in here and the phaser sounds in here. I find that they do a really good job of softening up some of the weirder stuff because speaking of this pedal, you don't just have a guitar pedal for guitar pedal effects in here. In the Beebo side of things, you've got oscillators, VCAs, ADSRs. You've got the whole wealth of modular synth stuff, including a bunch of Mutable Instrument stuff, which is open source and therefore on this pedal, which is really cool because I have long been a big fan of Mutable Instruments clouds, and you have clouds on this pedal, which be still my heart. I hesitate to talk too much about the synth side of things, the synthesis side of things, because it is ultimately not my wheelhouse. It's not something that I am hyper versed on. I have played around with Eurorack emulation software, and I have a background in using the Zoya quite a bit, which we're going to really quick in the comments below. I don't want to see Zoya versus Poly. They're different. They do different things. I feel they have very different strengths, and I feel they have very different limitations in different ways. It's not worth getting into the comparison between the two. I think they're very complementary of each other, and I think that they're very different despite the idea that they might approach similar concepts. If you've been following me on any channel for any length of time, you know that I don't like the comparison game because I just find it unhelpful. Anyways, we're moving on. Everything else in here tends to sound very, very good. And the touchscreen drag stuff around to create connections thing actually makes diving into that synth stuff actually really, really easy for somebody who maybe doesn't have a background in it. The multiple oscillator plugins that really let you just kind of click between different sounds, including kick drums and standard kind of sine wave oscillators up through like kind of vocal sounds and some cool chording stuff, can really allow you to build some very interesting, weird stuff in the pedal. At the very end of the video, we're going to kind of try to build a weird 3-voice oscillator thing from scratch using one of my other favorite things, which is the drum interface. I don't know what you would call it. It's basically a kick, snare, hi-hat trigger generator that allows you to use it to run different oscillators at different patterns and different intervals and that kind of thing. So it's really interesting. You heard all those drums on the intro of the video, and that was all generated inside the pedal. I forgot where I put the pedal. It's back there. It was all generated inside that pedal. The record stops were generated inside the pedal. The delays and the reverbs. On that intro, we did everything sans any other wet effects on my pedal board. We didn't use my reverbs. We didn't use my delays. All we used were the preamp and the 29 pedals for kind of my dry tone shaping, and which, by the way, we could have done without because this pedal's got great EQ and saturation and some really cool tape warmth stuff that I find to be very cool. It's kind of Studer tape machine emulation, which sounds really good. And it's got the IR, so we also could have done without the Iridium had we wanted to. Moving forward at this point in the video, we are going to be using it in the context of the rest of the pedal board because I just find that to be a slightly more well-rounded approach, I guess is how I would say that. A lot of my focus on this channel has been pedals in context being the rest of your pedal board. Very rarely you're going to buy even a multi-effect like a Zoya or a Poly and throw out the rest of your board to just use this thing, even though you could with some of these pedals. Everything's got its own strength, and so I want to showcase how you can use this in conjunction with your Empress and your Mercury 7s and everything else. So I feel like I'm rambling because there's so much to cover on this pedal, and we're not going to get to nearly enough of it. So let's just take a look at some of the basic effects, some of the cool ways you can stack a couple things inside of it. To that end, one of the things that I really love about this thing is the ability to kind of almost supplement your pedal board, the ability to grab stuff that you might otherwise not have access to on your board and use it here. So let's take a look at some of those basic kind of sound completion ideas, and then we'll dive into some of the weirder stuff as well. So let's take a look. Like we discussed before in the intro video, the Poly Digit / Beebo is everything that you're hearing with the exceptions of the Iridium and the preamp for drums, for guitar tone, for everything. Here though, we're gonna kind of build into more of that pedal board context kind of thing. I don't want to just focus on how the Poly can do everything for you in all situations, because that's not how I use it, and that's not how I use almost anything on my pedal board. So let's talk about context. Let's talk about how you can use this to kind of round out some parts of your signal chain, as well as how you can also use it for stuff that nothing else on your board can manage. So like the delays in there sound great, and we'll touch on those. If we switch over to the convolution, reverbs, and the digit side of things, you'll be able to hear how good those sound as well, even though you heard them on the intro. Speaking of context, the pedals that we're using here are going to be the EUNA by 29 Pedals, the Preamp Mark II by Chase Bliss and Benson, the Chase Bliss Audio Blooper into the Poly, then into the Empress ecosystem, the Mkii 7 by Maris, and the Strymon Iridium. The expression pedal that you see on kind of the left side of the screen is basically just set up to mute my volume through the preamp. So that's everything. So let's hear our quote unquote dry sound really quick, but it's worth noting that it kind of sounds a little funky in the way that I've got things run right now because I'm running into input 1 and out of inputs 2 and 3. So when it's bypassed, it's kind of off to the side. So let's hear that really quick. Oh, let's turn the volume up. Okay, and so we talked about kind of rounding out your signal chain a little bit. So this first thing that I put together is just a chorus and a stereo compressor, with the kind of caveat being there's 2 chorus sounds in this chorus module that's on the screen right now, and chorus number 1 is being turned on and off by an LFO. Like I said, this thing can look really daunting and really intense and really kind of out there, but at the end of the day, it can be made to perform some pretty simple, basic, round out your pedalboard tasks, and it does it really, really well. That chorus is great, and that compressor feels very solid. On the other side, here's something that I made during kind of getting to know this pedal that's a little strange and a little out there. This is the macro oscillator, which has a ton of sounds built into it. You can see all the different sample, I guess is what I would call them, the different tones, different concepts. I don't know how to describe. I don't totally know what to call them because I am just a guitar player and not the elevated life form that is the Euro rack aficionado. I am an admirer of that world. I don't know almost anything about it. But you have a bunch of oscillators here. I guess that's just what we're going to call them. With different voicings, I guess is what we'll say. And I have here a harmonic oscillator that is being modulated by 2 different LFOs that are also modulating 2 different ADSRs to create kind of a weird thing. It's hard to really describe what's happening, but this is what's cool about it is somehow it's just kind of modulating this weird drone in F thing. So there's texture stuff for sale here. So if you kill everything, you can hear that. So weird. Okay, this is actually one of my favorite things in this entire pedal. The drum thing, the drum machine that they have in this thing is really, really cool. So you can kind of do some weird stuff with the iridium with it, which I find to be very interesting. But the thing that I find to be really compelling about this thing is you've got your different oscillators, those same macro oscillators. Kind of pick all those sounds, the drum, and then, so to explain how this works right now, you have macro oscillators serving to create the sound samples for each of the drum parts. Those all feed into the input triggers here, and then this controls kind of how and when they come through. So, bass drum density, let's take all three of them to 0. Let's grab just the bass drum. Let's grab that hi-hat. Okay, and let's actually make a change to that. Let's dry it out really quick. What modulation you're hearing right now is actually coming from the granular and the delay modules over on this side of the screen, but you can also do some other cool stuff, like the plate reverb from Mkii 7, which I think is quite cool. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. Let's do this. Say I want to change the pattern as it goes. A way that I can do that is by adding a module, control module, a low frequency oscillator and LFO, and then connecting it there you go. And now let's change see, now you're kind of starting to modulate that a little bit. And what's fun is you can kind of just keep stacking that kind of weirdness. You could literally grab another LFO and connect the output of that LFO to the BPM of your other LFO. Make this one kind of a slow random as well. And then go into your bass drum. So interesting, and so it's such a great kind of creative tool, and it really lets you kind of be tactile with the way that you build stuff like this, which I really, really enjoy. And then if you want to, you can also just grab that input and connect it straight through granular as well. Moving on. By the way, all that reverb is coming from the algorithmic reverb in this mode. Okay, so between the intro song and some of the last few minutes, we've jumped through a bunch of the presets as well as some of the stuff I made myself to kind of showcase what this pedal can do in terms of complementing a pedal board. Let's go ahead and create something really weird from scratch. It may be good, it may be bad. I'm just really curious to see what we come up with. So let's go to empty preset and let's just let's start plugging away. Poly Effects, you make some incredibly bizarre stuff. I'm so impressed. I'm so wall-to-wall impressed with everything this thing's capable of. I really enjoy it on guitar. I really like the IRs and the convolution reverbs that are in the digit side of things, which we didn't really touch on in this video, but I kind of intend on going back and doing at least something using the other side of this pedal because there's so much for sale on the other side of this that we didn't even have time to get into. But this... it's just, for a guitar player, this is witchcraft. It's so cool. So Poly, thank you for this. This thing is great. It's so much fun. And everybody else, thank you for watching.